Hello, doing another tutorial today, this time on lighting and shadow. So I'll be using this map here that I've been working on. It's kind of a recreation of a map from Chrono Trigger. It's sort of unfinished, and unfortunately I ran into some issues. I was working on it in Photoshop, and the file became corrupted. All the shadows are baked into the scene now, and I can't really do much to change them. Luckily, it's mostly complete, so I can sort of finish it off, but a lot of the things I wanted to do, I can't really do anymore. All that aside, I can still use this map as a demonstration tool. Here you'll see some of the objects don't have shadows. So what I'll do now is I'll open this up in Photoshop, and I'll go through the process that I would normally use. Okay, here we are in Photoshop. Here's the grid as it would look in RPG Maker. So things mostly conform to the grid, but there's a few things that are a bit off, and that's okay. So I'm making a new multiply layer here. I'll be painting the shadow here on this layer. Let me just zoom out so I can show you the whole map. So I've got this kind of soft sunlight coming from just to the right of the map a bit. So I'm going to create another new layer here as a guide for the shadows. Since the sun is going to be casting light always on the same angle, I'm just going to create a bunch of lines on this layer to work off of. This makes it a lot easier to estimate where shadows should go on some of the more irregular shapes. It keeps consistency throughout the map. Okay, so I'm zooming in on these objects. And they're kind of complex right now because I've got a whole bunch of these objects all piled together. So what I'll do is I'll try to isolate one of them, maybe one of these boxes, and I'll start from there because it's a very simple cube shape. So I'll copy that, I'll put it on another layer. Let me just fix this here. Alright, so I'm going to show how I'm sort of calculating where these shadows go. So I'm doing two things. I'm following the angle that I have on that top layer, the angle of the sun, but I also need to figure out how high the sun is. So I'm going to do that with some basic geometry. I'm just going to use a ratio of 2 to 1. You could use whatever ratio you want. If you wanted the sun to be a bit higher in the sky, you might go with, I don't know, 3 or 4 to 1. I'm just going to put these in a folder for now. So now back to the shadow layer. I'm going to start by painting out the surfaces that are obviously occluded. Alright, to save some time, I'm going to change this back to a normal layer. And instead, I'm going to make a folder and set the folder to multiply. And then I'll put that shadow layer inside the folder. This way I can use all sorts of duplicate layers. So I can just drag this over, copy, 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 just to save some time. Now obviously after moving a bunch of these around, there'll be some errors in where the shadow is cast, so I'll have to fix that up a bit. Alright, I'm just going to merge them all together. Let's fix up the shadow on these pots. And over behind this box here. Okay, now let's work on one of these pots here. I'm going to paint out the occluded surface. So because this is round, it's maybe a bit easier to think about it as translational geometry. Just take the topmost part of the shape. Let's just imagine it's a cylinder instead of the more complex shape that it is. Okay, I'm going to turn that guide layer off, and let's copy this shadow around a bit. Let's put it on another layer and clean it up. So I'm just adding a bit of a softer edge as the sort of the light curls around this rounded shape. Oh, it doesn't quite fit. Let's fix that up. So the more you do this, the more you get used to some shortcuts, I guess. It'll feel more intuitive and you won't have to take as many measurements. I missed fixing part of a shadow there. I'm doing this voiceover afterwards. So the same basic rules apply to all the other stuff going on in the scene. It's just straightforward geometric measurements for the most part. It can be a bit time consuming when you have some of these irregular shapes all over the place and you have to paint in shadows for them all. But in the end, I think it looks pretty impressive, so I think it's worth the time spent. Okay, I'm gonna load this back up in RPG Maker now. So run over and have a look at our shadowed pots and boxes. So yeah, you can see on that bottom rightmost box, there's a shadow cast from the pot above it. Kind of shouldn't be like that, but oh well, I missed it. So I'm just gonna speed through this process here where I add some animated foliage. You can see more about this in an earlier video I did. I'll put a link in the description. Alright, that's the end of the video. Thank you very much for watching.